All right. Can everyone see the presentation, or is it showing something else?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. And I know the title of this conference is actually Big Data and Cloud, but I wanted to talk about a different subject. And that is artificial intelligence. There is a high amount of relation between the two, but I wanted to specifically dive into some use cases, talk about artificial intelligence in general, what it is, where it's going, how we deal with it at Deloitte, and cover some topics such as how it can be used and some of the risks associated as well. Another thing, I am hoping we can, I know we only have 30 people here or thereabouts. I'm hoping we can have a little bit of interaction going. I know sometimes it's hard during a Zoom call, but one of the ways that I'm hoping everyone can get engaged is by using the chat. So if you have a question, go ahead, throw it in the chat window. You can address it to me or to everyone, and I will try to answer questions as I go. And then I have a couple of instances in the presentation where I'd like some responses from everyone here. So both of those things, definitely be engaged, definitely use the chat, and we can drive this a little bit as a conversation. Great. So Alberto just went over my intro. I won't spend too much time on that. But in my role as a manager at Deloitte in strategy and analytics, my biggest goal is to spend time in the healthcare space. And I really enjoy connecting people and connecting dots, connecting the data that drives all the client outcomes that I seek to achieve, and using all of the different technologies, be it big data, be it cloud, be it artificial intelligence. I work at the intersection of a lot of those different technologies. Okay. So first off, wanted to ask a question to the group. What is artificial intelligence? And feel free to take a couple minutes and think about it to yourself. Take a couple minutes and throw your response in the chat. I'd like to hear from everyone here, if possible.
Come on, guys. Well, the question is, what is artificial intelligence? Or en español, ¿qué es inteligencia artificial? Si gustan, lo pueden comentar en español and we can translate it.
Yep, and I can read Spanish better than I can write it. Thank you. Thank you, Lupita.
¿Qué es inteligencia artificial, chicos? Para ustedes, ¿qué se les viene a la mente cuando escuchan inteligencia artificial? ¿Alguien?
Okay, cool. A combination of algorithms. What else?
Thank you, Daphne. You have more answers, Brennan.
Yes, I'm seeing them roll in. So the capacity of thought, and I'm translating as I go,
Yeah.
to take decisions based on algorithms, but not made by a human. Good. A machine that that completes activities similar to a human. Cool. Okay, so there's a bunch of different definitions. No one here is is wrong. But one definition that I think is more complete is this: the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and translation between languages. So actually, the capacity of thought and to take decisions was very close. The thing that I like better about this definition is it's a little bit all-encompassing. Honestly, artificial intelligence has fits more underneath it than even the things in this definition. It's an extremely broad field, but thank you everyone for participating. Okay. Now, another one where I'm hoping to get everyone's response. Can you think of an example of artificial intelligence? We talked about some of the broad areas of artificial intelligence, but where have you seen it used before? And this can be daily life. I can think of a couple of examples where Google uses artificial intelligence and it impacts my daily life. I can think of an example at work. So what are our thoughts on this one? And again, can be in Spanish. No worries. Un ejemplo de inteligencia artificial.
You have some answers already in the chat, Brennan.
Oh, I do? Okay, it's not showing up. Thank you. Awesome, perfect. Okay, so chatbots, good. That's an example of artificial intelligence. That actually belongs to something we usually refer to as conversational AI. Siri is actually another example of actually Siri combines a bunch of different fields within artificial intelligence. Siri and Google Assistant are two examples of something that is very fluid in conversational AI, but also uses a bunch of different subsections within artificial intelligence to collate all the answers for the questions you ask it, actually understand your speech, respond to your speech, and so on and so forth. CCTV and NVR functions to add a face recognition. Exactly, just like the picture. Cool. Algorithms in social media, digital assistants, YouTube algorithm. So yes, exactly, a recommendation algorithm. That's like your stereotypical example of machine learning, which is another subsection within artificial intelligence. Okay. Self-driving cars, exactly. So that's another one that takes in a lot of different types of artificial intelligence. Not only do you have to take in a lot of data and make sense of it, but also you have to act on it. So decision support and decision analysis is one of the areas that you're talking about in that case. I actually don't know what Wombo AI is, so I will take a note and read up on that one later. Okay, so these are all very good examples of artificial intelligence. I prepared a couple extras and more from a Deloitte perspective, more from an enterprise perspective on things we've done in the AI field. And I do believe these are more, so we talked about a lot of different types of artificial intelligence. We talked about conversational, we talked about decision analysis. I think one we missed was more of a sentiment analysis. But a lot of the applications that we have are more around, are more around machine learning. And so I can talk through a couple of these. So if you put yourself in the position of someone who runs a customer-facing business, let's say retail, for example, or someone who has a subscription, runs a business focused on subscription. One of the things that businesses are looking to do is reduce churn. And churn is just the amount of people that are leaving the business. So if you're talking about a subscription, it's the number of people who end their subscription. So this is one of the examples of machine learning we've used at Deloitte. Talking about retail, a hyper-personal shopping assistant. So this kind of gets at what some of you were talking about before, with kind of a combination of the cognitive AI like chatbots, but also then using that to recommend what you might want to buy at any given time. Financial services. If you're a bank, one of the big things that banks focus on is anti-money laundering. So there's a whole bunch of artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms that banks will run to see if anyone is doing something illegal and trying to launder money into the banks and take credit for more or less illegally obtained cash. In healthcare, one of the examples would be imaging results. So if you get an X-ray, if you get MRI scans, can you use those just through artificial intelligence and machine learning? Can you use those to identify maybe cancer, a tumor, something like that, or something more simple like a positive test result? For operations, logistics is one of the places where there's a lot of complexity going on in logistics. And so having a machine learning model that can look at all of your routes and decide on the best one is something that humans are not particularly good at, but machine learning really is. And honestly, it's in all of these places, machine learning can often exceed what we're able to achieve as humans. Okay, so one of the things that I was thinking about before giving this presentation was everyone has experiences with machine learning. You told me so in the chat. That was great. But how does that apply to you as students? How, especially when we're talking about the enterprise applications. You've seen Siri, you've seen Google Assistant, you've seen Cortana, Alexa, everything else, but all of the industrial applications that I just talked through, how does that apply to you? And so Deloitte has a couple of studies, and I'm actually going to move. Okay. Deloitte has a couple of studies that it runs across the field in artificial intelligence, all industries, all sectors, and we analyze some of the trends from a Deloitte perspective. This is from the state of AI in the enterprise. And everyone here as students eventually will be looking for a job, I'm sure. And one of the most important skills and requirements for organizations right now is AI expertise and proficiency. And so from a jobs perspective, having that edge, having that AI background and understanding a little bit about it is extremely helpful to employers. And that's one of the top things they're looking for. So right below that is critical thinking, and right below that is data science. So honestly, in my opinion, AI and data science very much go together. They're highly linked. you can do data science without using AI. But if you are doing data science, some other kind of data science besides machine learning, you're making sure probably that the data gets where it needs to go. And after it gets where it needs to go, there will be machine learning algorithms applied on top of it. And so no matter what, you're going to come in contact with machine learning, with AI, with conversational AI. It's just a matter of how well can you contextualize it? How well can you talk about it? And then the next study, which was from this, actually, it's from the same study, but this is more around investments that companies are making in AI technologies. So I won't talk directly to the graph, but needless to say, there are a lot of AI projects going on across industries, across sectors, and most people, most companies are expecting to drastically increase the investments that they're making in artificial intelligence. So that last slide where we talked about the need for employers, the need is not going away. It's only going to increase. Okay, so I wanted to use this segment as a little bit of a conversation as well. I'm hoping that we can use the chat again and I can get everyone's opinion. I don't know if anyone has read about some of the dangers with AI, but if so, I'd like to hear it from everyone. What do you think are the potential dangers for artificial intelligence? What do we need to be on the lookout for? Data breaches, cool. That's extremely true. And actually, that has two sides. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. That's actually part of the presentation. But artificial intelligence helps out with people who are trying to protect from data breaches, also with people who are trying to perform data breaches. Skynet, fair, yes. Terminator style, Skynet, robots take over the world. I mean, I don't know if anyone has heard Elon Musk is concerned about that. That's a totally valid answer. Corruption by users, yes. One of the things that I often think about is what is the bias of artificial intelligence? Because algorithms often are only as good as the training data that's used. So I don't know how much we know about machine learning models, but what you have to do, like you grow up as a toddler, you learn about things as you go. Maybe you accidentally stub your toe and that teaches you how to walk. You accidentally touch something sharp and you realize that you shouldn't do that. That's how we learn as humans. And machine learning models, artificial intelligence learns much the same way, only they need a lot more examples. And a lot of the times, if the examples are not representative of the total situation, the machine learning model can make mistakes, because the machine learning model is only as good as two things. One, the humans that designed it, and two, the training data that the humans fed to the model. So if they're missing something in the training data, if they coded a part of the problem wrong, you might get wrong results. And a good example of that I like to think of is Google recently came out with True Tone. And so that actually takes pictures. I should say the machine learning models are applied on top of pictures. And for instances where not the picture takers, the subject of the photo has darker skin in the past, that's something that's caused a lot of problems for photographers. For anyone looking to depict a photograph, it causes problems. And so Google took that and said, we need to fix this. We need to fix this with machine learning models to show something that's more true to form for a photograph and depict it on the screen. And so if you look up, I think it's called True Tone. I could be misremembering the name, but definitely take a look at that. It's very interesting. It's one place they've been able to supplement the data of machine learning algorithms to help something that has been stereotypically ignored. And it looks like we have a couple more responses in the chat. AI hacking methods, yes, we talked to that a little bit. Substitution of the human workforce, that's a great one. That's a great one to bring up. Yeah, as AI grows, will it take more jobs from folks who don't have AI expertise, for example? I think one of the things that has come up in research a couple of times is oftentimes this is creating as many jobs as it's letting go, but these skills definitely, they're different. And so one of the things that we need to focus on as a society is upskilling people to make sure that they can keep up in this environment. And so that's one thing that becomes very important as you talk about job losses by AI supplementing, substituting human workforce. Google Lens is also AI, yes, because basically that's all about recognition. Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about, and I know I'm starting to run out of time, so I may breeze through this section a little bit. But every year, Deloitte puts out an annual tech trends. And I took our annual tech trends and I took specifically the ones that pertain most to artificial intelligence so that we can talk through some of them. As some extra context, for a lot of years, and it's something that is very important to us. It's something that we have been tracking for more than 10 years, actually. And what our focus is looking at the CIO, the CTO, the CEO level. What do organizations need to be focused on? What, and not only what do those organizations and those senior executives need to be focused on, but also what insights can we get from those senior executives as well about what they're thinking? Where is the business going? How are, I mean, this is specifically about AI, but how are the big corporations using AI? How do they see it baked into their strategy? And how are all of those macro technology forces, one of which is AI, how are they shaping industries? How are they shaping organizations? And so if I move one more slide here, the tech trends for 2022 are a couple different ones. And by the way, I should mention, this is something that we put out to the public. And so if you search Deloitte Tech Trends, you will find a lot more information on this. And I highly recommend you read it. It's a great overview of where tech is going. And so probably a lot of these seem fairly household names. Data sharing, cloud, blockchain, automation, Cyber, we already talked a little bit about cyber, but specifically cyber AI, which how do you protect using AI? How do you attack using AI? The tech stack going physical. And what that's talking about is smart devices, drones, industrial robotics. Where is that? How is that? How are all of these sensors that we now have access to, all of the physical pieces of the tech stack, where is that shaping the industry and where is that going? And then finally, what's next? So really, these first three in blue are focusing on advancing enterprise. These next three in green are really focused on how are we optimizing? We already have this, but how do we use the stuff that we've already started to build up? And then projecting the possible, that's like 10 years from now. What are we looking at and what is going to be the impact of these new technologies? Okay, so disrupt thyself, automating at scale. So, and I can talk a little bit about automation. AI is one huge piece of automation, but I'm not sure how many folks have heard of robotic process automation. That's been a game changer in the industry. How I conceptualize robotic process automation is it's basically if you can run through a set number of clicks on your mouse pad, like let's say you need to do something in Excel and you click here, you do that. It's similar to that, but it's across your entire PC. So in Excel, you can build a macro. This is basically a macro where Excel is the entire PC, and anything that you can do on the entire PC, you can automate it via this avenue. Now, the second piece of this as well is DevOps, DevSecOps, zero trust security, software-defined networking, hyper-converged architectures. All of these things have been huge drivers. And not only in IT itself, but also in machine learning. If you've ever heard of the field of machine learning operations, that is kind of a brand new field that grew out of machine learning. So I talked a little bit about before how it's very important to train your models, right? And then test your models is another piece of that. So if you feed into your artificial intelligence model, you feed in all of these training cases, you test that, you make sure it's working, you put it in production, and it's making recommendations for an enterprise on the fly. What happens when the same training cases that you put into the model, they don't really work anymore? And a good example of this is healthcare. Let's just talk about a health insurance company. I've told you all that's a little bit about my experience. So in a health insurance company, you're paying claims. Your users are getting surgery. Your users, in this case, members, your members are getting surgeries. They're having normal testing done. They go into the doctor and the insurance company is paying. They're paying for the surgery, they're paying for the test, they're paying for the doctor visit. Okay. Now all of a sudden COVID hits. One thing that happened is that any surgery that was not critical got postponed. So essentially, after COVID, say we were using a machine learning model to predict how many surgeries would go through and what the cost would be any given year, any given month, any given day. Well, COVID hits and that completely changes because nobody's having surgery anymore unless it's critical for your health, which, if you think about it, is a crazy thing that completely changes the landscape of health insurance as a whole. Okay, I think there's one more slide on, yes. So we talked through a couple of these already, but automate your system and software management. That's exactly what we talked about with the DevOps and with the machine learning ops. And coming back to that, when COVID hits, how does it change the landscape? Basically, whatever machine learning models you were using before are not valid anymore. So there's a couple of problems baked in there. One is, how do you recognize that? Are there automated systems in place to tell you that your machine learning model is no longer functioning? Two, are there automated ways in place that you can go in and change that machine learning model? So I'll give you a sense of how long it takes to build and test a machine learning model the first time with engineers. It's a several month-long process, usually. And so does that mean as soon as one starts malfunctioning, do you have to then go back and repeat that month-long process? Or is it something that, since you baked it into your operations and your automation, does the model know how to retrain itself based on the new data? That's a huge game changer that came out of machine learning ops, which, as I said, is a brand new field. And the first piece here is talking exactly about the RPA that we were discussing. And there's a couple of use cases that are used from a Deloitte-wide perspective. I won't talk about them as we're running out of time, but across a couple of different companies, we've used ServiceNow, that's actually ticket management. So can you automate your IT process is the question there. And then UiPath is the RPA technology that we were talking about. It's one of the softwares that was built out in robotic process automation. All right, so moving on to cyber AI, real defense. I know we talked a little bit about this already, but what does it mean to have not only machine learning baked into your cybersecurity defense, but also cybersecurity baked into the cybersecurity attacks? So one of the ways that AI makes the difference here is there's anomaly detection in cybersecurity. And in that case, it tells you where someone might be attacking. It's kind of an automated monitoring system, if you will. Now, one of the things that's happening as well, which that second point is getting at, is there are cyber criminals who are using the rise of AI, the rise of digital assets, the rise of digital currencies, the rise of data and AI to attack. And we're using the same things to defend, but really what we need to do from a cybersecurity perspective is to raise the bar of the defense mechanisms as well. So in summary here, and this is what that last point is about, fight fire with fire. As much as we're getting attacked with machine learning enabled attacks, with AI enabled attacks, with crypto enabled attacks, we need to be able to defend the same things, and we need to bridge that talent gap. And then give me a second, actually, because I want to make sure that we leave time for questions. Okay, there's two more. So I am going to kind of just talk very quickly through these next ones. Can everyone see my screen still? Somebody throw me a thumbs up in the chat or something. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, and let's talk about the tech stack going physical very quickly. And really, as we mentioned a little bit before, this is about sensors and what sensors can do for more or less organizations who are looking to make use of AI. One of the things, if you've ever worked in sensors, is they produce an enormous amount of data. And for a long time, organizations didn't really know what to do with all of that data. So really what this is it's taking all of that data, making something of it, and pushing forward. And then one of the most exciting, I think, pieces of the tech trends is this: field notes from the future. So what's coming next? Ambient technology, life beyond the glass, exponential intelligence. So what is the next stage of artificial intelligence? And then quantum computing. How do those fit in? How do those fit into the current environment? And where do they sit? And how are organizations going to be using them in the future? So if you think about those, quantum is something that's honestly quite far away. I think the most interesting thing in quantum, from my perspective, is especially in AI, the applications there. One of the things quantum allows you to do is to take really hard computing problems and solve them in a fraction of the time. I'm certainly not a quantum expert, but one of the problems that's been proposed as a fix to quantum is we have some really hairy machine learning problems that it takes basically forever, or it's impossible to train certain algorithms to perform certain tasks. And quantum essentially alleviates that. Granted, this is only being able to occur in very, very limited use cases at some of the biggest quantum research facilities in the entire world, but it's one thing that could really, really impact the future. So what exponential intelligence talks to is a little bit more on what is the next generation of AI. If you've heard about deep learning, what does next generation deep learning look like? As we gain more computing power from, just in general, we're always gaining computing power, but also if you start to enable something like quantum computing, how does that change the types of predictions and the types of models that we can perform? And as we go from telling machines to teaching machines, we also need to start thinking about the ethics, because once you get to exponential intelligence, once you start to come closer to achieving something like a generalized artificial intelligence, what does that mean? And then finally, ambient experience and life beyond the glass. I think we've seen a lot of this. What does the next generation of the Google Assistant, Siri, I know you've all heard about Google Glass, but that's coming to the forefront again. The Snap goggles. I think there's a set of Ray-Bans as well, and they're getting into that space. So really, this specific tech trend is about where are those things heading. Okay, and I want to open the floor now to questions. Thank you all for listening, and I hope there's a ton of questions. Definitely would like to hear from you, what you think, what you're most excited about. And yeah, I think I will open the floor, and should I, no, I'll pass it back to the moderator at the end. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Brennan.
Of course.
Damos inicio a la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. No sé si alguien del público tenga alguna pregunta. Puede realizarla ya sea levantando su mano y para abrir el micrófono o realizando la pregunta en el chat. Y lo pueden hacer ya sea en español o inglés. Me parece que María nos va a apoyar con esta parte de si alguien necesita que traduzca.
Okay, I see one question.
Yes.
Blockchain is an AI. Blockchain is not an AI. Blockchain is a very different technology. I don't think I have the time to cover quite explaining what blockchain is, but I'll give you a quick summary. Blockchain is a decentralized accounting method. You should definitely look into it. It's very interesting. It ties in with all of this. There are applications that tie in artificial intelligence with blockchain, physical hardware with blockchain, and so on and so forth. But it is an entirely separate technology.
Ok, thank you. No sé si alguien más tenga alguna pregunta. Recuerden que pueden levantar la mano para abrirse el micrófono o también pueden poner su pregunta en el chat.
What do you think about data sets for AI with blockchain? I would have to research on that. Blockchain is an area that I know something about, but I haven't delved into from a very detailed perspective. Honestly, just from a general blockchain perspective, there's a couple people that you might want to look into. Let me type these in the chat so you know. So those two people, you can follow them on Twitter. They often post on Twitter about the most recent upcoming developments. Nick is a little broader, I think, but Vitalik specifically focuses on Ethereum. A lot of the stuff they put out is around blockchain in general, and it's a good way to learn. I don't think there's a lot of solid material out there, but definitely listen to a couple of the podcasts they're featured in if you want to learn about that.
Okay, thank you. One more question in the chat.
Yep. I think that AI is interesting, but it's also scary at the same time. What is the most scary thing about AI that you know? So honestly, I think conversational AI is one of the pieces that I think is scary, but this might be because I have a general lack of knowledge about it. I mostly think it's scary from a privacy perspective. If you talk about the digital assistants and things like that, just how much are they listening to? Of course, there's safeguards around that, but there have been news reports and things about them actually not going to sleep when they should. So to me, that is probably one of the most scary things. My experience is very in machine learning. And so I think that makes me a little less scared about the robot take over the world sort of situation. But that's probably just because I know a lot more about it. Okay. So I think we have time for one more. I'll just take first come, first serve basis. And I can stay a little over if that's okay with everyone. Do you think it's possible that quantum computers can expand the capacity of AI? Definitely. Definitely. Some of those hairy problems that machine learning engineers haven't solved, that machine learning researchers haven't solved. Definitely, I think hopefully quantum will enable solving those problems. And if it doesn't enable it, it will make it much more mainstream, such that these sorts of computations can happen quickly. Okay, and with that, Alberto, I'll hand it back to you just in case you need to close up, but I'm happy to hang around and answer more questions as well.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Are there variants of blockchain? Oh, so there are variants of blockchain. Blockchain is a technology. I'll say it's a technology type. Whereas if you talk about something like Bitcoin, it is an implementation of a blockchain technology. And so there are a lot of different flavors of blockchain, but AI isn't necessarily related. It's just that AI can be used together in tandem with blockchain. So AI is not a type of blockchain, but a type of blockchain, if you think about it, would be Ethereum or Bitcoin or things of that nature. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I see here.
Yes, I think there are questions. So, a nombre de la Facultad de Informática, agradecemos su participación en la Semana Académica y Cultural 2022. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Les recordamos a todos los demás asistentes que en este momento hay otras dos conferencias en la sala A y la sala B, las cuales son desarrollo de aplicaciones móviles en cloud usando low code, y en la B, la música y los derechos de autor en la era digital. Los invitamos a que pasen a las demás conferencias y también los esperamos al final de la clausura. Muchísimas gracias.